well, as I say, the third consecutive quarter that confidence has remained static at these low levels. Overall, good or bad news that we're looking at here?
Yeah, steady and low and stagnating. So, and that is 4 years into this movement. So it has been going on for a long time now, compared to seeing a far more vigorous recovery with interest rates at 35-year lows and the economy growing. So this is not good news that this particular sector just continues to struggle.
Certainly not good news, but what's interesting is that we've got 3/4 of respondents, yes, within the different sectors, continuing to rate prevailing business conditions as unsatisfactory, but that means that there is a percentage, a quarter of respondents that are satisfied. So who's forming part of the quarter that seems to be satisfied at this stage?
Obviously, people are doing well. It is not as if all activity has grounded to a standstill. But even so, for example, in the residential market, the number of units being built is basically half the normal average long term. So that gives you an indication the extent to which there has been a fall-off in recent years. At the same time, it is not down to zero. So throughout the pipeline that we try to cover in this survey, we do find there are still some people who express confidence, but it is really very limited. Whether you're talking about building material suppliers, manufacturers, or the retailers thereof, or architects and quantity surveyors, or the actual contractors and subcontractors. Yes, there is still a percentage that claims to be confident, but it is a very small number compared to the overwhelming number of people who say no, they're not confident.
So we shouldn't read too much into that at this stage of the game. What has been highlighted in this report, though, and you've touched on it slightly there, is that we've seen this uptick in residential building activity having waned, but within the non-residential activity sector, activity seems to be carrying on. So what's that divergence being attributed to?
I think on the residential side, the second quarter uptick just wasn't sustained, and might just have been imagination, given the very small changes in answers to the questions that we've been asked. At the same time, of course, the reality in the residential market remains one of oversupply, of constrained credit conditions, given the new credit culture that has come into being. While in the non-residential side, there has been some rise in confidence, but from extremely low levels. And yes, some indication that activity levels may be picking up. But it seems to be very much limited in scope. It is not broad-based. In the private sector, it is a matter of refitting all the buildings. And in the public sector, it may be schools and hospitals in some provinces. But you're not talking in a broad sense the office, the retail and the industrial space markets really coming back at this point. So although there is some uptick on the non-residential side, and it is now being suggested that it is being sustained for another quarter, it is still from extremely low levels, and it is early days.
Early days there. Globally, we're talking about this crisis of confidence that's emerged in the global economy, and locally it seems to be the case as well. If we're looking at the residential side of things, where you touched on it being constrained by credit conditions despite the low interest rate environment, where we're hearing talk of a possible rate cut emerging in the near future, what kind of bearing do you see a 50 basis point cut having on the market?
It concerns me that the reasons for the market still being down for so long is structural and is due to South Africa. But especially over the past quarter, I really wonder how much this bad news from overseas, especially the European crisis, but not limited to, also events in the United States. We are getting a daily news flow which has been extremely negative. It has impacted on our local markets. I think people are very much aware of what is happening there. And to what extent has that made key individuals in these markets nervous, and are they delaying or postponing important decisions? And in this particular industry, it is to buy a house or to start building a house, or to start a new non-residential development. It is for us very difficult to split out the reasons why, the causes why, but besides our structural shortcomings, I think the industry, this particular industry, is certainly suffering from demonstration effects coming from overseas on a daily basis, specifically this quarter.
Yeah. If we have to look for a silver lining, what is interesting is that we saw main contractors within the non-residential building space see profitability property decline at a slower pace than has been the case in the past, and that's for the first time in a year. Take us through that and what's influencing things there, because we know in the past tendering and competition on that front has really exerted massive pressure on margins.
Well, in that respect, then, the real adjustment lies behind us, and we have had a long adjustment at this point in time. So you can increase your tendering competition only so much, and you can reduce your margins only so much. There comes a point where automatically you do start to bottom. So for us to pick up these signals, for me, is an indication that, yes, the industry has been really squeezed. But I wouldn't want to read into that either a cyclical turn, not given the kind of responses that we're getting. It is just a confirmation of activity being at extremely low levels and this continuing, increased tendering competition. Yes, the decline in profitability seems to be slowing down, but it is at very low levels. So it gives you an indication of just how bad it is out there.
What's your outlook moving forward? You say that we're set to see this continue. For how much longer? When do we hit the bottom? I know that you don't have a crystal ball for that, but what are you perceiving from what the industry's been reporting back?
The structural limitations, shortcomings that we have identified locally, I think have longer to run. In the United States, they talk of, say, a 6-year period for these kinds of things to be addressed. Whether that the same applies to us remains to be seen. But given the kind of responses that we get out of the industry, it would seem that these structural shortcomings continue to be a factor. In addition to that, we have these international developments, which may be putting off people who might be committing themselves to new projects or to new activity, to hold off, to delay. In the process then, all these things together, even with another interest rate cut coming through, my sense is that the stagnation that we're observing in this building trade will continue for the time being. I hesitate to say that it is just another quarter and then we will see improvement. Given what we are experiencing, I sense that this is a longer term play out still. We may see small changes in specific areas as we have again seen this particular quarter, but if you're asking me about the cycle, no. I think it will continue to stagnate at these kind of levels.